That's good. It's Dr. Mario Wallace with the third part to the series on navigating complexity, effective change management strategies for adaptive environments. Let me recap part one and part two. Part one was more about complex adaptive systems and what does that look like in an organization, how organizations have complexity within them, the people in the organization operate as semi-autonomous agents who gather in clusters of people within networks who are influenced by key influencers. They have conditional interactions within the organization. They self-organize based on change initiatives that they receive. They communicate. The information that communicates in the organization is not necessarily hierarchical, although that's a part of it. It's only one part. Information flows through sharing within by the key influences within the social networks. Um, People don't necessarily get information from the leader, the supervisor, manager, and the director within their organization, meaning they don't necessarily trust the information that they're gathering. They tend to trust information that comes from close proximity within their circles. So with that said, we need to understand the whole concept of social networks and network science, uh, and how researchers look at network science to understand the social dynamics of people within the organization, how they interpret that information in order to actually, the first step of understanding the social network is to do a social network mapping, and to interpret the mapping of the social network, looking for bridges, hubs, key influencers, links, nodes, the people that nodes represents people, looking for the density of the social network, how many bridges, how many key influencers, because everything is based on the social dynamics and how do you effectively influence the social network with a strategy. The next part was wide bridges, how wide bridges support the whole social network concept of that lives within a complex adaptive system. And that is, according to wide bridges, according to Dr. Damon Tola, there are um, two ways of communicating. One is a fireworks pattern and one is a fishing net pattern. A fire net pattern seeks reach. It's information that goes out with not the intent to, it doesn't seek redundancy of information that leads to the change in behavior. It just basically informs people of information, as opposed to the fishing net pattern. It's designing a fishing net, designed like a fishing net, just for an image, a fishing net. But everything is connected. The people are within the net is connecting. So when information goes into the net, it's shared amongst people consistently. And the sharing creates a sense of redundancy of information. And as people consistently hear the information, they begin to collaborate on the information they're hearing. They begin to debate the information. And through the sharing of and debating, it leads to fostering new behaviors and new innovations within an organization. There's also what we call uh, wide bridge. You have narrow bridge with weak ties and wide bridge with strong ties. Meaning weak ties, narrow bridge with weak ties mean there's not a lot of ties overlapping of people within an organization that can create a sense of change in an organization, as opposed to wide bridge with strong ties. They're wider. It's not one person knowing somebody in division A, B, and C. It's multiple people from division C knowing multiple people in division A and B, which creates a more wider connectivity and what we call wide bridging strong ties. But now let's talk about the third part is artificial bridging, and it's my extension of Dr. Damon Tola's method of wide bridges. And let me explain. So what exactly is artificial bridging? I'll give you my definition. So artificial bridging is an extension of wide bridges, basically a socially engineered, re-engineered model. It supports wide bridges in all its applications, but it's more practical and includes an element of the agile mindset, which consists of psychological safety, the agile implementation, meaning knowing how to develop projects such as short iterative sprints, and how to adapt those projects, and how to take the success of those projects and create a standard operation procedure or a minimal viable product for an organization. So basically, it's an extension of White Bridges, but with a social agenda. And let's compare the two. So when you think of wide bridges and artificial bridges, wide bridges are mostly organically formed. Dr. Santola actually looked at the past social movements and identified elements within those social movements that create the concept of wide bridges. He looked at the Arab Spring movement in 2010. He looked at the Civil Rights movement in 64, 65, 66. He looked at the Black Lives Matter movement in recent years. And what he found based on thematically was that they organically form these connections of people within these social networks organically begin to communicate with each other. The initial thought of changing the organization or civil rights movement before anything happened that led to them wanting to do march in a civil rights march and all and change the Arab nations through the Arab Springs movement. There was no clever strategy devised at the top to change human behavior, knowing with the intent to change human behavior within the world, in a sense. So basically, wide bridges is organically formed. It's an organic formation. Basically looking at the past, seeing how things happen organically based on different strategies that people were using. Basically, how things came together. The research focused on studying the success of past movements that led to the identification of different themes that created what we call wide bridges. And lastly was limited practical application. While the study of wide bridges looks at success, identify successful movement, is limited in its application because it's not designed for practicality in the present and in the future. It's basically looking at the past and understand historical successes and failures within some movements. But artificial bridges, the formation is deliberately created. It's a more controlled design. The bridges are deliberately created by external forces beyond the actual movement. It's created with a sense of giving direction to how things should go. Basically, you take elements of wide bridges, you build it for the future, you make it more practical, and you implement it, and you see things, and you use social network strategies and bridges to drive success within the chain or the movement. And then there's specific agenda or behavior change, a specific agenda that leads to behavior change. And the research focus is more practical application for fostering desired outcome. So there is a more of a strategic implementation, meaning artificial bridges are strategically placed to connect groups that wouldn't naturally interact with each other. This allows for targeted to spread information and promote new behavior changes. So the goal is an agenda for artificial bridges. The people within artificial bridges, once a social mapping has taken place, is to build what we consider an agile mindset with the people who are the key influencers so they can actually foster and push the new agenda throughout the social network. So let's look at it in a more practical lens. So then this looks more like wide bridges. A lot of people are connected within the social network, but what you see are the key influences are the yellow dots. So unlike wide bridges, the key influencers must have the agile mindset. They must understand psychological safety. They must know how to innovate, how to take information, how to set up projects, sprints, rapid iterative sprints, and to learn from those sprints in order to foster behavior change or create new innovation. And then they must know how to package the outcomes of those sprints and replicate them across the organization to actually foster change in an organization. So basically, a more seasoned change practitioner who understands social network mapping, network science, complex adaptive system, Wide bridges have to work with the influencers or key influencers. So basically, the first thing is to map the social network, identify the key influencers, identify the clusters, identify the hubs, identify the bridges, identify the connections, as we can see here. Once we do that, the key influencers are in the yellow are being trained and educated by seasoned or more agile practitioners or change practitioners who have a higher sense of how to do change from a agile perspective, or this whole concept. What I'm saying, understand the person understands complex adaptive theory, the person understands wide bridges, the person understands firework patterns versus fishing net patterns, and lastly, the person understands artificial bridging. So how artificial bridging differs from wide bridges is that there is another element to it. The key influencers must be trained and educated on agile mindset. And again, there's three things that consist of psychological safety, being able to foster psychological safety within that cluster or the network of people, where people feel a sense of sharing information consistently without fear of retribution or retaliation, better word. They're able to work within sprints. They set up these sprints and they run these different sprints, these different projects based on what they're hearing within these groups. The influencer allows someone to present information and they test that information and test it. And once success is identified from those initial sprints, and behaviors emerge or new informations emerge from these particular sprints, and they test and test and test, then they take those sprints, they take the results of those sprints, they package them for the sense of replication across the organization, which leads to behavior change. In addition to wide bridges, based on studying the network and seeing that there are areas that there's still no connections, artificial bridges begin to make additional connection that's needed for information sharing that leads to fostering human behavior change. Let me recap on this. Artificial bridges support wide bridges in all of the application, but wide bridges looks at the past, while artificial bridging looks at the present and future. It takes those elements that was identified within wide bridges research and build out a more practical method for the future. But it also includes the agile mindset. And I didn't give credit to the agile mindset, where this whole concept comes from. It comes from Dr. Malas Bustani and Dr. Jose Azar. They are the founders of Agile implementation, Agile innovation, and Agile diffusion. These are concepts for advancing innovation within healthcare systems. If there are any questions about this information that I lectured on, reach out to me at info@allthingsstrategic.org, or reach out or connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thank you. Hope this information is helpful. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.